Zoom call, and I know that the commissioners know the drill. Questions and comments in the chat, and introduce yourself every time. For some reason, that seems to be a requirement. If anybody is calling in, the information is online, so you should be able to get in very easily, and your number will come up, and we'll give a shout out to you as soon as we have our presentation tonight. We will have a community outreach, if you want to call it that, so that we can bring in anybody who's interested in making any comments tonight, has their opportunity to do that. So first of all, I think will be Gus. Are you going to take the roll?
I'm sorry, Joan, I was typing. I did not hear what you said.
Are you going to take the roll?
I'm not. I was just going to make Kristin the host, and I need to go back to a council meeting. I just was going to open the meeting for you folks. So
we'll miss you. So Kristin, will you take the roll?
I will. I was just being told I was going to take the roll. So let's see. Jason Boyce.
Here.
Joy Lewis.
Here.
Ron Fall.
Present.
Janice Carl.
Here tonight, thanks.
Joan Probola.
Here.
And then we also have present Doug Yormick from staff, Kristin Listen, Keith Niven, Jen Davis-Hayes, and Susan Lowe is here as well. And Robin Buchers is excused tonight.
So the next thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Do I have, for the minutes of August the 13th, do I have any objections for passing, approving the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about our favorite subject, the comprehensive plan. There are 3 possible rezones that are possible in our city, and Kristin's going to give us an update on exactly what they are and give us an idea of what we should do. So Kristin, please take it away.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Kristin Listen, Senior Planner with the Community Planning and Development Department. There we go. And you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good to go. So yes, tonight we're going to talk about the proposed redesignations and rezones. And for the first time in a long time, we do not have a rezone request to be community facilities. Just as a refresher, we have 2 different types of rezones. One is a type A rezone. Request is consistent with the comprehensive plan land use designations. So somebody wants to go from single family suburban to single family small lot, those both fall in low density residential. In this case, this is a type B. None of the requested rezones are consistent with the comprehensive plan, so they all require comprehensive plan amendments, so they follow that same process along with the comp plan. The first one that we're looking at tonight is called, we're calling it Legacy Landscaping. It's located on the southwest corner of Newport Way and SR 900 there in red. It is it's a little under an acre. There is currently a landscaping office or contractor there on site, and it's been commercial for a very long time. The existing land use designation is low density residential. The property owner is requesting commercial or mixed use. The existing zoning is single family suburban, and the property owner is requesting again commercial or mixed use. As you can see, to the north is actually central Issaquah, to the north and northeast, and you have urban core zoning, and then there's the Raleigh Development Agreement to the north and northeast. To the west is single family suburban, and that's actually the Bergsma property that was purchased last year to eventually become mostly, I believe, open space, but some potentially recreational space as well. And then single family suburban to the south, and the Talus is further south of that. and single-family estates actually to the south, and then Tallis south of that. Over to the southeast is the Tibbetts Valley Park. So some of he wasn't specific on which types of zoning that he would like, so we looked at a couple of different ones. Currently, as I said, it's single-family suburban, and the property owner can go up to 30 feet high, can have 40% impervious surface, 60% impervious, and there we go. Oh, I should mention too that currently this use that's on the property is legally non-conforming. So that means that this property was permitted back in the 70s, I believe. I don't have it right in front. They were permitted back in the 70s as a gas station, and then a landscaper moved in. It was done through a PUA, which is a property use agreement. And then eventually, once we adopted our now land use code, the property use agreement and the retail designation that it was given went away, and it was designated to single family suburban. So that is how this use wound up there in the first place. With the two zones we were looking at were mixed use and urban core. So I'm going to skip over urban core really quick, or go over that one really quickly. To do urban core would be kind of difficult. Urban core is it's inside Central Issaquah. It's a Central Issaquah zone, and it might mean creating either a new zone for urban core or bringing this or changing the boundary of Central Issaquah, which I don't think is something that we want to do right now. And it's also more dense than mixed use. If we were to do mixed use, it has 90% impervious. The base building height is 48 feet as opposed to 60 feet for urban core, and the max building height is 65 feet opposed to 125 feet for urban core. So if we were to rezone it, that is what we would propose to do. These are the uses that are allowed. They're essentially the same. They're listed differently in the Central Issaquah standards as opposed to the land use code that we have, but they're very similar to each other, the uses that are allowed. The pros in rezoning this, it would bring the property into conformance. So if it's legally non-conforming, it cannot expand its use. The property owner, so rezoning it would bring it into conformance, would allow the property owner an expansion of the existing use, and then it allow a variety of potential uses. And it also makes the property easier to sell in the future. And the cons pretty much negate every one of those. So cons, if you don't rezone it, it remains legally non-conforming. The property owner cannot expand, and the property remains legally non-conforming and is difficult to sell. So something that we like to do is to see all properties be conforming. So our recommendation right now is to rezone the property to mixed use. So if you all would like to stop and chat here, we can, or I can move on to the next one.
What's your choice?
I like to discuss each one as we go through them because then it makes it easy.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
taking a bite at each one as we move
Okay.
be helpful.
Okay.
Kristin, I apologize for interrupting you before you start again. I just wanted to share that. Would you mind changing the host role to Doug? Because he has a paid license, and that way, if I drop off, he won't drop you a call. This call.
Before you cut me off, before you had to leave, I wanted to tell you that I am not trained to be a host. So
Okay, no, we're on the same page. So if you just right click on Doug's name and change role to host, that will continue this meeting as is.
Okay.
Apologize, everybody. We're just trying to deal with some technical issues here.
So Kristin, are you the one that's going to follow the chat room?
No, Doug is. Hang on, I'm trying to expand my site because I shared my screen. Should I unshare my screen to be able to see?
Yes, please. That's the best way to do that.
That's how I do it. Okay.
Thank you. And then if you click on participants, and then you'll see Doug.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. When you right click on it, right on top, it'll say change role. Yep.
Okay. I just can't get it big right now. It's still small. Let's see. Here we go. This should do it. Let's see. Okay. And I right click on Doug and say change role.
Yep. And say host, and it should switch from there.
Nope. It's not working. And I
That's okay. If it doesn't work, Kristen, then I'm going to stay here with you. Please continue, and I will. I'll let Tisha know that I'm going to be here for the duration of the meeting. No problem. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So what is everybody seeing right now?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
Here we go.
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So the only concern that I have is the property that is exactly southeast of it is a single family residence. And what is their feeling about that? Otherwise, I really don't have any qualms about it.
I don't know what the feeling is about it. I do know that this property owner of the legacy property and two other property owners have a shared driveway agreement. It happened, oops, let me back up. I'm having difficulties, I'm sorry. There we go. The property agreement, so the city vacated the driveway there that looks like the little tail back in 2001. And the legacy property owner, the property owner to the southeast, and one other property owner have a joint agreement. The legacy property owner is required to maintain, it's a bridge and it's an access for three of those properties. It's a bridge, and the legacy owner must maintain that bridge and the access off of SR9, off of Newport Way there. But otherwise, we were made aware of that by another, we already knew about it, but we were made aware of it again by the adjacent property owner, but I haven't heard anything about the rezone.
Okay.
She has been sent she's been sent the agenda and all meeting notices.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the fact that it's going from 40% impervious surface to 90% impervious surface, but that property has other environmental impacts, so they would never be able to get to the 90% impervious surface. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do we know how close they would get to that?
No, I don't.
So would they have to do an environmental study or something before they actually build?
Yes, and I know that Keith Niven is on the call here, and he may be able to answer some of the current planning questions and development questions better than I can. But yes, they have, with every review, and I believe there's 9 environmental impact statement. Go ahead, Keith.
So can you guys hear me? This is Keith Niven, Director of Community Planning and Development. So the answer is there's 2 ways. If this property is rezoned, what could happen is either an expansion, so that just might be something small, because there's really not a lot of extra room on the property. If you've driven by it, there's a building and a fenced-in yard, which is where they keep their trucks. And so, I think what you're asking, Commissioner, is really what would a redevelopment project look like? And so, the zoning code, the zoning standards that would be associated with mixed use are maximums. And so as you talk about things like impervious surface limits, they could get up to the limit, assuming you could actually do that on the property. So things like Tibbetts Creek runs through the corner, kind of where the tail is. That's the back part of the property, which would be like the southwest portion. That's all hillside going up Cougar. So the reality is, as Kristin mentioned earlier, even if they bulldoze the existing site and put something else there, from an impervious surface perspective, you probably can't get much more than what's there now, because the entire usable flat part of the site is paved. It's either got a building on it or it's got a paved yard.
Okay. So assuming redevelopment at some point in the future, if we rezone this, would they have the ability to go in and wipe out the hillside abatement and put in a new abutment?
So the hillside is considered a critical area if it's above 40% slope, which has a buffer at the bottom. And, you know, the critical area code does allow you to potentially reduce that buffer on the bottom, but it's all based on geotech stability and studies that go with that. So, you know, so if your question is there a likelihood that all of a sudden they cut out 20 feet of the hillside and build a 40-foot retaining wall? Because you have to, like, you're chasing slope on your way up, right? No, that's not going to happen.
Okay, we're going to go to a comment from Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Joan. This is Commissioner Joy Lewis. I was curious about the properties to the south. I appreciated in my conversation with staff this last week, talking about the history of this property. When we were working on creating the urban core, we really purposely tried to keep this very tight and reined in. And while right now I think mixed use is a really good designation for this property, I'm curious, you know, we start to see parcels start to get bigger. Right now it's my understanding that there's homes right there. And I'm curious, you know, we really have to be willing to say, if the situation changes to the south, how far do we want it to reach? And so at this point, how would staff feel about this giant chunk? Kristin's map is a little hard for me to read, but basically to the next major road, if that all became mixed use, how does the city feel about that kind of a wave of expansion possibly happening over time as land values change and as obviously as urban core maybe picks up, having more space? I'm kind of curious to see how you guys feel about that.
So immediately to the north, well, as you know, as I mentioned, immediately to the west and northwest is the Bergsma property, which is going to be permanent open space and or recreation. To the southwest of that is Harvey Manning Park, I believe. Yes, also permanent open space or recreation. A little further south, you start to hit Tibbetts Creek. Part of that area has been developed already as single family. Or wait, it's further south than that. There's, you know, with the steep slopes in there.
Yeah, so Kristin, if I can.
Yeah, please do.
So the road that shows up at the bottom of the map, that's James Bush Road, okay? The bottom portion of James Bush Road, so on this map, consider about the first inch once you get west of 900, that's a 22% slope. So as you look at these houses that are south of Legacy Landscaping, they are up a hill. They really don't, you know, some of these closer to James Bush are actually the front ones are on SR 900, but the ones immediately south of Legacy are up a hill. So as you talk about whether or not this zoning action would lead to kind of a sprawl, say, of commercial down SR 900, from an access standpoint and a topography standpoint, there's probably a natural barrier there for that. So I, you know, at least today, I wouldn't see that as being a likely candidate for an extension of other non-residential zoning.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Are there any more questions or comments? Shall we go on to the next
We
one?
have a comment from Commissioner Jason Boyce.
Snuck in there.
Hello, this is Commissioner Boyce, and just real quickly, is there, and again, this is all as far as the historical and the clarification, it makes sense. This was zoned quite differently in the 70s gas station. So it kind of seems odd to me that it was missed, but Is there some type of exemption or special permit that could be made for this particular property, or is it just simply easier to rezone this particular parcel?
No, nothing in place.
Is that allowable as far as like a special permit for this particular parcel, or is that just not something the city typically does? It'd be easier just to rezone this parcel.
It's easier to rezone this parcel.
Okay, fair
No.
enough.
And doing something to allow just this property is not exactly what the property owner is looking for either. He's like, you know, what can I do? So that wasn't the request. So rezoning is the best option. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I don't ever remember seeing a gas station there. That's a long time ago.
Yeah. Are we ready to move on, or are there more questions?
There's
Okay.
nothing in the chat room, so
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm having a funny time with my screen. Let me rearrange some things really quickly so I can see their presentation. Okay. Okay. Trailhead. And really, this is kind of called Trailhead, but it's also called CenturyLink because Trailhead would not go here. CenturyLink would. So, but I'm just for the sake of identification, we're calling it Trailhead tonight. This is located over near the city shop site and down the slope from Issaquah Highlands. It is adjacent to I-90. It is actually two parcels. One is just about an acre and the other one is just over 6 acres, so 7 acres total, and only about 4 of those acres would be rezoned. On the site currently is an RV park. Part of the RV park would be displaced, but the city is talking with adjacent owners about potentially relocating some of the RV park there. The existing land use is community facilities, and it's proposed for commercial. And the existing zoning is community facilities, and the proposed zoning is intensive commercial. And we have a John Deere sales site just to the west of it, and I-90 to the west of it. Most of it around here is vacant land, and the area in general is primarily intensive commercial with some community facilities in there as well. And the idea, for those who don't know, the idea is that CenturyLink is currently located over off between Maple and Newport and SR 900, next to our transit center. The proposal is to relocate that operations site. It's a storage garage and an operations center, and the proposal is to relocate that to this site, and they're about the same. The existing site's 4 acres, and this will be 4 acres. And then on the site where this was, put housing, about 360 units, 175 of which would be affordable units, and also some community services down there as well. And that is the reason for this request that the city is actually making. Oh, went through the surrounding uses. Proposed standards. So right now, the community facility standards, they have to be consistent with the most restrictive adjacent zoning, which in this case is intensive commercial. So an intensive commercial allows for 90% impervious, 10% pervious, a 40-foot base, and a 65-foot maximum height. Intensive commercial obviously allows, it doesn't allow single-family housing there, but it does allow for botanical gardens, funeral homes, essential public facilities, outdoor recreation, food and beverage, hotels, industrial intensive commercial, medical, office and professional, and retail and service. So some of the pros of rezoning this is that it allows for the relocation of CenturyLink so that we can build the 360 units on the other site. And this site is actually more appropriate for the storage garage and operations center than its existing site in the urban core. And at cons, as I mentioned before, a portion of the RV park would be displaced, but we are working on finding a way to relocate it. So our recommendation would be to rezone the site, CenturyLink site to intensive commercial. You all have any questions?
This is the housing unit that we had talked about, what, 2 years ago, where it was kind of public-private.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And Jen Davis Hayes is here tonight too to answer any questions that.
And Jen Davis Hayes has expressed wanting to comment.
Hi, thanks, Kristin. That was a great job of describing somebody else's project. I know it's always challenging when they're sitting by. I just wanted to mention the one thing that is a little different from the time we submitted this application many moons ago is that the actual amount of acreage that we are looking to rezone or to change the zoning actually may be smaller than 4 acres because we're trying to really we're working with CenturyLink to determine how much space they actually need, and we may be close to more like 2.5 acres. So we'll, of course, work with you to have the exact amount and all that good stuff. I just wanted to let the commissioners know that it's a smaller portion, and that the RV park that you mentioned that we will. The plan right now is to have some sites still remaining, and potentially look at it's not a private property owner to the adjacent property. It's the city who owns the property to see if it makes sense expanding the RV park. Right, that is something that again. We need to do a bunch of more studies, et cetera, but we are very aware how important that aspect is.
So how many RV places are there? And do people stay for extended amounts of time? This is their home.
There are about, well, again, this information is from late last year, so it may have changed, but there are about 56 sites. 2 of the sites are mobile homes. So again, different than an RV where they cannot move. And about 20 of those RV sites are rented monthly, and people stay there year round. And so the other 30 some are rented out daily, weekly, and it kind of changes. There are some people that come and the owners told us, of course, you come in to travel to the region, you bring your RV, you park there, enjoy the area. There are some people who come and work and live out of their RV for a 6-week stint at area hospitals or other jobs in construction. So it's a variety of uses there.
Does anybody have a comment or a question?
We have the next comment is from Commissioner Fall.
Why doesn't it come up on my chat?
I don't know. I have a comment from a few comments after that comment as well. I don't know why it's not showing up on your chat.
So Commissioner Fowl.
Because I went first last time, I'd like to go after Jason. Let them go first.
If I heard that correctly, I'm just going to jump in here. So this is Commissioner Voice, and mine is just a point of clarification. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Kristin. Both great presentation. And Jen, you did answer some of my questions. So just real quickly, because the agenda packet. So the idea is to actually take CenturyLink from its current place, move it over to this area, which is surrounded by intensive commercial, and then use the place where CenturyLink currently is to put the 360 housing units. Do I have that correct?
That is correct. And
Okay.
that zoning is urban core, where CenturyLink is currently located. So again, much better suited to a mixed-use development than operation site of a utility.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fowl.
Okay, so question about the building height. Max building height on intensive commercial is 60 feet. Is that correct?
65 feet.
65 feet, and that's the same as commercial.
There is no commercial zone. Mixed use? That's the same as mixed use.
Let's see, I'm looking here at the PDF and I see centers and uses required. It says max building height is 65. So what's it now, 60? Or
It would still be 65 because it defaults to the most adjacent and most restrictive zoning, and the adjacent zoning, the only other one there is intensive commercial, so it's still 65.
okay. My next question, cell phone towers. How does that play into this equation? Just in case there's a cell phone tower that goes up.
I'm going to defer to Keith Niven.
Excuse me, Keith Niven, I need a shorter title, Director of Community Planning and Development. So cell towers are allowed in every zone. So whether it stays community facilities, or changes to intensive commercial, the property owner has the ability to negotiate with a cell carrier for a tower or a small cell at that location. Did that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yep, I did. Thank you.
There's a question from Commissioner Lewis.
Commissioner Joy Lewis here. Jen, I think Keith had sent you on some questions that I had, and I was hoping that you could address them. Some information about the project.
Okay, let me, was it about the RV park attendant or the?
I have a lot of questions, actually. That's why I sent them ahead. So I think the best way to kind of summarize it to start and see how you want to respond is to say that I would love to see a lot more transparency on this project. Right now, I think there's a lot of details that are missing. And while you guys have obviously done a lot of work on this over the last couple of years, I think it's important for the community to see what we're giving, what we're getting. And it's always hard when the city proposes a rezone when all the ducks don't feel like they're in order. So when I'm looking at this proposal, that we got, it says that there's going to be an acre parcel and then a 6.16 acre parcel. And now you're telling me that there's probably going to be less than 2. I'd kind of like to know what it is. I'd also, I like the designation as far as where CenturyLink's operations and it makes a lot of sense of where it's going to go. It's a great idea on paper, but when you actually start looking, it's nice to see the actual details of what's going on. So right now, as I understand it, there's these 3 interested parties. And I'm pretty curious about a developer who's coming in and getting a really cherry spot of land. He's going to have a giant commercial retail space down below, and he's going to have the majority of units, because right now it's 185 will be at market rate when we're getting 175. So I'm curious, how are those numbers determined? Because he's going to be building CenturyLink a site, and then he's going to be building a building that he's going to own the property and he's going to be owning the building. I understand that Issaquah isn't really in the business of being a landowner, but I don't see this as being a huge win for affordable housing. For us old timers that were worked on affordable housing years ago, we've obviously been frustrated to see that there hasn't been any units that have been built with all these things that we thought were incentives. But I'm not seeing this as being a big win, because we talked about all kinds of different incentives and things we wanted to create. So when you talk about, the affordable housing units being for people who live, have 30 to 80% of the median income of our area, we talked a lot too about first responders years ago, nurses, teachers, people who may make $50,000, $60,000, $45,000 a year who work and serve our community but can't afford to live here. And so we talked about having prioritization for our firefighters and their families and being able to have different spaces. So when I look at this project, I don't want to start tearing it down, but Keith directed me to the site, pardon me, that's on the city website. And I'm not seeing a lot of information that talks about the numbers and the decisions that was gone into it. And yes, I do have concerns about the RV park. I understand that we haven't included those numbers in our affordable housing because there is a transient population that happens and comes and goes from it. But when I was communicating with staff this week, Keith was estimating right now, again, the numbers are soft, that 30% of the RV park would remain. And I have concerns about that. I think it's important that we protect such a limited resource in our community where vulnerable people do have a space to be able to go, or even people who come and go out of our community in a way that may be different from other citizens, but really still contribute to our economy and to our success. So I think there's a lot of questions, which is why I was emailing questions all week about this. And so I was kind of hoping, Jen, you would be able to kind of give us some more details, really, like how this developer was chosen, and to say how that number was chosen. Why was it 175 rather than all of them? And then there's commercial retail underneath. So I'd like to kind of dive deeper into this. But on the face of it, obviously, moving CenturyLink to that area looks great. It fits aligned with the way that we kind of have been planning things out. And so again, it starts out nice, and then for me, it starts to kind of get really fuzzy. And I really hate doing code changes when things are still fuzzy.
If I may jump in for just a minute, this is Kristin Listen with CPD. One thing is that this rezone, if the project doesn't happen, the rezone doesn't happen. So essentially, what you do is you set, I overstated that just a bit, but you set a date and you say, once permits for this part of the project comes in, then the rezone happens. That way you know that both of them are going to happen for sure. So it won't just be rezoning something and then nothing happens, for one. That may address part of your question. And then, of course, I forgot the other part that I was going to say, and I apologize. So go ahead. I'll remember it later.
So great questions, Commissioner Lewis. Sorry. I guess what I would offer is to a couple different things is to take a look at the website and see if I can update some things and get all the questions that you asked, but also potentially come back later to the PPC and provide an update about the TOD project, because it is a very complex, long story. And it started out with us, the city, doing a request for proposals. So we solicited, and we had 3 teams, and this was the partnership that we chose. And while it may seem like they're getting a good deal, it's costing them about, well, I don't want to quote numbers and not be correct, but it's more than we originally anticipated to relocate CenturyLink. And so there's a lot of nuances. You're right. There's a lot of complexity. And we will be actually going in front of council this fall, because right now we're negotiating the purchase and sale agreement, and that's 3 parties. So you have the city, you have our development team, which is Spectrum Housing Solutions, and King County Housing Authority. So there are 2 entities that will be owning the TOD site. And then CenturyLink. And so, as I mentioned, the actual land that we thought originally we needed to replace 1 for 1, because they have 4 acres over there. We have talked to them and said, okay, can we be more efficient with how we lay out your operation? So they were open to that, and therefore there's more space for us to own the land, which is the RV park afterwards. Regarding the RV park, this land was not meant to be an RV park forever. It was actually meant to expand the operations of the Public Works site and other city shops. So it was never meant to be a long-term solution for affordable housing. We understand it is being used for that, and that's why instead of saying let's just remove the entire RV park, we are going to spend some effort to see what we can do to keep some of those sites there. But in the long run, the city may in 5, 10, 15 years decide they need to expand. They want to move facilities over from Confluence Park. They want to do X, Y, Z, and that would be displaced at that time. So anyway, there's probably 101 other things, but I would love to come back and give more details. I'll get your email of the questions asked, and I'll share that and answer that and share that with the entire commission, whatever's easiest to proceed.
Yeah, I really appreciate staff putting on this opportunity and this forum for us to discuss these things before they're in front of us for the vote, because I think it helps to kind of really have as much information as possible. And often, our packets, though well prepared, it can be hard to include something that has this multi-year history. and something that really has a lot of important components to it. And so my big takeaway right now would be to say that before we meet on this again, the more information you have on this, the better. And really to say that the more that we're able to put forward to the public to present this, how this is a win and kind of how we came to these numbers, I think it's really important to really have a broader transparency about this complicated project that hopefully serves everybody in the end, but on the face of it, the way it's presented to me now, doesn't necessarily look like that. And again, my goal is not to tear down this project that clearly has had a lot of work into it and has a lot of great potential to it. But I think that by adding more visibility, we'll be able to kind of bring a little bit more light to what's going on.
So, Kristen or Jen, maybe you can, in the future, come back with a very short presentation on how, basically what we went through when we thought this was such a great idea, how the things are being paid for and how people are going to be supported once they get in there with all of the facilities in the bottom half. It's been, 2 years or so, and a lot of people have forgotten exactly what it's going to be. So, instead of them being surprised, I think it would be nice to just say, hey, look at this, let's all get behind it. If you could do that.
Sure. I'll work with Kristin. Mm-hmm.
And just one comment before you guys maybe leave affordable housing. So the council has been talking about affordable housing a lot, and there is going to be a presentation, I believe, on September 21st at a council work study session about affordable housing. And one of the things that Kristen and I have worked on is kind of putting together an overall view of affordable housing and affordable housing tools and how productive they've been in our city over the past 20 years. And so that will all be part of that conversation on the 21st. We'll share that document with you guys. One of the things that, and again, not to counter anything you said, Commissioner Lewis, but to get 175 affordable housing units in one project, that's a lot. That'll be towards the top of our ladder in terms of kind of bringing more units to our community. So, but we'll have I think a more rich conversation about that in future meetings. But I just wanted to add that there is this separate affordable housing conversation that will be going on with council next month.
So I know there's a lot of discussion on affordable housing, but I kind of like to switch it and say housing affordability. And I think you need to bring that into it with all the things that go around it, not just 175 units or 2 units in a complex, which is normal, but all the things that go into making that project affordable, which the city is going to have to do some work on permitting costs and time frames and everything else to make that go smoothly. My comments.
Can I just jump on without adding to my chat, since I like we were kind of talking about, Keith, I think that part of this conversation needs to be reframed a little bit with that transparency of saying like what we're getting. Like one thing I love about this project is that there's going to be, I think, a 1/4 acre public park. One thing that's been historically a problem with affordable housing is it's often not treated the same as other housing. And so you don't get the same kind of facilities and you don't get the same kind of community feel. So being able to put it in a space where there is no difference between every other piece of housing is really important. And so I love that there's these components to it, like the public park and things like that. So there's a lot of good things, and being able to showcase, I think, all of what's going on really aids in us understanding like the depth of the project.
Clearly, there's a gap here between the enthusiasm that staff have for this project and where the commission is, which means we haven't done a very good job communicating why it's a benefit and why it's worth getting excited about. So we have some work to do. That's what I hear.
Well, on the other hand, I'm really excited about it. Just the presentation that you guys did, bringing in all the sides and how they're going to pay for this was just a remarkable plan that really hasn't been done before. Kristin, do you have a comment?
I already made it. Thank you.
Okay, just making sure. So, any other questions before we go on to the final rezone?
Okay. Let's see. All right, so the last one that we're going to talk about is, I hope I pronounce it right, is the Vanama property. This is a little hard to see, or at least on my screen, but it is located on the southwest corner of Black Nugget Road and Highlands Drive. It has a single-family house. It is abutted on the south side by the North Fork Issaquah Creek. To the north and east are community facilities zones, and most of those, Alton North, have stormwater detention ponds on them, and the one directly to the east is vacant. And then to the west and south of this property are single-family estates. And then you can see maybe the striping below that. That is where the urban village Lakeside is located and will be developed. And then Issaquah Highlands is just off to the southeast where all those pink dots are. It is, whoops, goodness, very sensitive mouse. It is currently, the land use designation is low density residential. They are requesting retail or mixed use. The existing zoning is single family estates, and they are requesting professional office or mixed use. The intent is to either potentially put a dental office or some other use, perhaps mixed use, on this site. Currently, they can have 30% impervious, 70% pervious, and a building height of 30 feet. To change it to professional office or mixed use, the impervious surface could be either, for professional office, it could be 65%, 35% pervious, 40-foot base height, and 65-foot max height. And then for mixed use, 90% impervious, 10% pervious, 48% base, and 65% max, 65-foot max building height, just like professional office. So again, the uses are fairly similar. Professional office provides a few more. It's a huge list. I'm not going to run through it, but it's pretty much what we've seen with the other districts tonight, zoning districts tonight. The pros are the area around this is developed quite a bit. You have Klahani to the north, you have some multifamily to the west, and as I mentioned, Lakeside and Issaquah Highlands to the south. But the cons is that this site is surrounded on all sides by either community facilities or single family estates, and it abuts a creek. And the city believes this to be proposed rezone. If we did it, it would be a spot zone, which is not legal, which means that this use would not be consistent in any way with any of the uses that surround it. So we don't feel that we can do it at this time. So our recommendation is no change for this property. That's what I have.
Kristin, is this right next to Sunrise?
I get the two confused. Yes, it is close to one of the, yes.
It's right there in the corner.
It's close to it. Yeah, let me go back up. Can you see my mouse? I think that this one right in here is Sunrise. You can see that where the brown is.
I thought it went all the way up. Well, I guess it's.
There are two. There's another one up here in this property, and then there's one here. Two care facilities. I think this one is Sunrise.
Yeah, that one's Sunrise.
Okay. Okay. So are there any questions about this one?
We don't have anything in the chat. Oh, Commissioner Fowle just submitted for a comment.
Of course, everything needs a comment. So I support the city, I think, on this one here, because if we hypothetically did allow this to be retail or mixed use, the egress onto this property would be very difficult if you had high volume. I have a map of this property pulled up, and with Highlands Drive and Southeast Black Nugget Road, high volume, but the type of traffic patterns that are there would make egress onto this property very difficult and maybe even a liability. That's
If you
all.
look at Sunrise, I think they have a problem getting in and out. I'm surprised there. It's what it is. I often wondered how they can go around the bend and go down the hill. Anything else?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again.
And if there are no questions, or before we get into that, is there anybody who would like any, I'm going to open up to audience comments.
Okay.
I know that there's somebody here from the Legacy Landscaping. I was wondering if he would like to speak.
He might be muted. I don't know.
He is. I will unmute him in case he's talking.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Chris.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm Chris Holacek. I'm the owner there of Legacy Landscaping. We've been there since about 2008, and I appreciate you guys' time and listening and taking on this perspective. I do want to mention that there was some questioning about some neighbors and some history and things that have gone on previously to my ownership. And I'm happy to report that I have all neighbors backing me in the transition of us being considered mixed use or commercial use with the property.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Hearing none. Do any of you have any questions, answers, comments? Nothing? We have a comment from Commissioner Lewis.
I had one comment, and it's specifically about page 18, and it talks about the likelihood of housing targets being increased. I communicated with staff my feelings about this, but on the record, I wanted to mention, every year when we get our updates and we look and see where we are on our housing targets, where we are on our job targets, we always see this kind of weighted in favor more of housing and not so much on the jobs. And when looking at those targets, we've been lucky because we've kind of had an ace in our pocket with Costco. And if you take that away, jobs doesn't look quite as rosy as we would like it to. And when I see that we'll most likely be increasing the housing part, it gives me a little bit of pause. And I just want to mention that we're always wanting things to be done to scale so that services are done. Right now, we see, schools being opened with portables. Obviously, kids aren't physically in school right now, but when we think about the long-term planning of our community, we don't want to see gaps in services. And it concerns me to say, it felt like a slide in, I guess is what I'm going to say, is that when I was reading it, to say, and just anticipate that we'll be increasing those numbers. When that gets revisited, I would like to get a little more information on that. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up since it was part of our packet today.
Keith, I have a question for you. With this new housing going in across from the transit center, are there any other plans to add more housing near the transit center?
So right now, so basically, we figure out how to approach this one. So I'll just keep talking in circles. So Keith Niven, Director of Community Planning and Development. So we've basically upzoned all of Central, which is, so everything within walking distance of the transit center on SR 900 basically allows for residential and commercial at high densities. Around the park and ride up at Issaquah Highlands, basically what's left is the non-residential that's owned by Issaquah Highlands Investment Fund. And because all the stuff that's behind it on west of 9th that's under construction, that's all Taylor Morrison, which used to be Polygon. And it's basically all under construction, and there's somewhere around 400 units back in there that are being built. And that's really still walkable to the Highlands Park and Ride Garage. But, that's kind of it at the moment. Now, at some point, 2041, I guess, is it 2041? Sorry, it's been a long time since I've thought about the transit center. So, by then, assuming, Sound Transit is still functioning and gets ST3 done, we should have a transit center on the valley floor. They've said they really don't want to do a siting study until 2026. So that's still a few years away. And then the question for us might be, do we want to try and do something to encourage residential proximate to where that facility is going to go? Or is the market going to do that on its own? With Costco building their new office building, the Rowleys have built their Poplar office building is nearing completion. Gilman Lofts is got temporary certificate of occupancy, so there's some more office. That's really the first office that we've gotten in a really, really long time. It's been just housing. So, the pendulum usually swings back and forth. And so my guess is especially once Costco's 640,000 square foot office building is done, my guess is there will be more people wanting to build housing near that. And so we'll see. But there's right now, other than just the zoning that we put in place, Commissioner, I don't know that there's nothing in the pipeline now that suggests another big housing project coming in, other than the TOD project, which we talked about earlier tonight. And that's the one that the city's been kind of facilitating.
So you talked about transit. I just want to have an area that you can build that. I don't want houses to come in and big buildings to come in because you're not going to get rid of them. So I think we have to have a basic kind of, it could go in this area. This seems reasonable. Let's wait a while to put a 30-story building on it. That's all. Anything else for the good? Then we'll go back to Kristin.
Yeah, this is Kristin Listen with CPD, and I just wanted to address one of Commissioner Lewis's thoughts about that will be our housing targets will likely be increasing in the future. So one of the things that we've been working on over the past year is our buildable land study, or our growth capacity study, which is something that we do about every 8 years or so. With this one, the county and the state are requiring that we renegotiate growth targets for the county, and each city is required to take a certain new amount of new growth, both housing and jobs. So while we get to negotiate that based on what our capacity actually is, we will likely be getting more housing. We won't, our targets will increase a little bit. We don't have much of a choice for both jobs and housing. So we just finished phase 3. We turned that in last week. And once we hear more information on, phase 3 is right, we're going to come back to Planning Policy Commission and the City Council and say, here's where we stand. And here's what all of our numbers say. Hopefully we can say, here's what the county's looking for, and kind of here's the direction that we're like to head. But what we want to do is focus all that growth. One of the reasons that we did Central Issaquah was so that we could put all of this new growth that we knew would be coming with new targets into Central Issaquah.
You know, one thing that the pandemic has caused a lot of employers to rethink their office space needs. So, you know, I mean, take a look at, I think the biggest domino that fell locally was REI basically backing out of their new building in the Spring District. You know, so as we talk about housing and employment, you know, I think there's probably going to be a little bit of time that we all need to see what happens once we get past the pandemic and how much return to work is there and how much remote working continues. Because all of that affects everything that all of our plans are based on. All of our plans expect these work centers that have, you know, supporting retail and housing within walking distance. Well, if everybody's working from their home, that's a different equation in my mind. So I think where we are is a strange place in terms of kind of trying to predict how things are going to grow. You know, what Kristin is doing in terms of buildable lands is on par with what we've done for a very long time with King County and with PSRC in the state. And, you know, does that need to change at some point? I don't know. I think there's still a lot of balls in the air in terms of seeing how all this plays out, and whether everybody returns back to work or whether there's a hybrid workforce that we're all dealing with, you know, for a long time to come.
So bouncing off of that, with everybody staying at home and using more internet, more power, what's the status of all of the AT&T and those guys putting in their 5? What's going on with that?
Well, what I can tell you is I think AT&T got slapped on the wrist for calling theirs 5G Edge, because it really wasn't 5G, but they were claiming they were on the edge of 5G, and I think the FCC told them to stop. So they can. So I haven't heard any AT&T advertisements lately, but where we are is there's a couple things going on. You know, so obviously T-Mobile gobbled up Sprint, and you know, so right now you've got T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast would probably be your 4th carrier that we have locally. You know, a lot of people have been complaining about internet speeds because there's just more use out of households now. I don't think Comcast has done much in Issaquah to improve kind of bandwidth, which then leaves people ultimately with maybe a choice to use 5G once it's available. Right now, we haven't really seen much activity from the carriers in Issaquah, but there is some conversations going on with T-Mobile in terms of maybe doing some sort of 5G pilot project in our community. So stay tuned, so to speak. You know, there has not been an avalanche of new antennas installed in our community once we passed our wireless code. So, you know, I think there's just been probably other things happening. But, you know, a lot of it's demand based. And so, you know, as people are now demanding more access to high speed out of their households, you know, it's likely that 5G will probably be the answer for that.
I just don't want to see a box every 500 feet throughout the entire city. It would be crazy.
Yeah, well, and there's been continuous lawsuits by local government in the Ninth Circuit. Pretty much, just to give you a summary, is that, you know, local governments pretty much lost all of their appeals to try to regain some of their local authority over the wireless carriers. So, you know, basically what the FCC said is it's an essential infrastructure, and therefore many of the things that we try to do in terms of aesthetics and placement, we don't have very many tools to use. So the code that we adopted, at least my understanding is it's still fine. I think everything that we put in there is still relevant. But, I think the municipalities were hoping to get a little bit more control back over siting and aesthetics, and that doesn't look like that's going to happen, if I were to guess.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Commissioner Fall has a comment.
So thanks, Keith, for that information. I was actually very interested in that discussion as well. And I think to one of your points and to Joy's point as well, as far as bandwidth goes, if we don't have adequate bandwidth to support the needs of the community, we may have an increase in traffic because people will be moving into the office. So one of the ways that we may be able to actually help reduce congestion in the city is encouraging people to work from home. So we may have another tool in our tool belt to say we have high-speed internet that is able to support the community, and therefore that's a way to keep people out of their cars. So, and right now, I'll be honest, my internet sucks. I mean, I didn't mean to say that out loud. It's terrible. But, we could also use that as a strategic tool to help reduce traffic.
Absolutely.
So I don't see any more comments, so I'm going to go back again to Kristin to give us an update of what's going to happen now. Meetings, what's going on? You're muted.
Because they kind of, whoops. Can you hear me? Yeah, because they kind of merged the two things I was going to talk about, the schedule and the next steps. So our next meeting is September 10th. And we are scheduled to talk about the architectural standards, potentially with DC. The comprehensive plan will go over the rest of the amendments that we have for our public hearing. And then the mobility master plan, Stephen is going to come back and talk to you all about that. We had originally planned on Megan coming back to talk about the environmental board, but she has asked if we could move that public hearing. We couldn't continue it, so we're doing it again. And we want to do that. She wants to do that on the 24th, which means that on the 24th, we will have the environmental board public hearing, as well as the comprehensive plan public hearing we'll start it for the rezones. That'll be our discussion that night. And then we'll continue it to October 8th, where we'll talk about, you guys won't make a decision yet. You won't make a recommendation yet. And then we continue it until October 8th, look at the rest of the comp plan amendments, and then you make a recommendation on everything, the rezones and the rest of the comp plan amendments. So the schedule's changed just a little bit.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yes. Do you all have any questions? Do you think you can handle that? Is there anything else you'd like to see?
Do you really?
I know Jen and I are going to work together to get her back here as well. And I think the only date that we could do that will be on the 10th. Sorry, I apologize.
No. Do you think that we're going to be able to discuss the mobility plan in one meeting?
I hope so.
I have all confidence that it will not happen.
Okay.
That's why I said, could we divide it in half and have it in two different, part of it one time, part of it the other?
Well, the problem is,
we didn't do it tonight.
The problem is that he is out of town today, and we'll be out of town on the 24th. So what do you need from him to help focus that conversation a little bit better to see what we can get through on the 10th?
Commissioner Joy Lewis is jumping in randomly and rudely. I went ahead and I sent you my questions on the master mobility plan to help this, continue that dialogue. I think one thing that would help before we see Stephen again is to say, a specific document or a specific section that says, here's what's changed, right? Because we have this giant document, which I'm sure we're all going to read for another time, but being able to say, answering individual questions, offline, but also here's what we heard from the community. And so here's what's different might also help speed that up a little bit.
So this is Kristin Listen. Here's what's different between the comprehensive plan and what is in the mobility master plan, or here's what's different from last time you saw the plan.
Here's what's different from the last time you saw the plan. It might help facilitate our conversation a little bit better. To be able to say, like, obviously we'll get our initial questions answered offline, but being able to have something that says, and maybe the answer is nothing. We think this document is perfect as it is, but I'm guessing they're going to say we've taken some feedback from the community and some dialogue here and there with council, and this is what's different. Might help break down that big document a little better and facilitate the conversation rolling a little bit better, specifically on the master mobility plan.
So do we have to say yay or nay at some point in time? To give our
During the comprehensive plan amendment public hearing, that is when you say yay or nay.
Okay.
Council will have already endorsed the plan at that point. Hopefully, that's the plan. It's going a little backwards this time. Yeah.
So
Time we're living in.
So if they endorse the plan, so it's already done, and we make all these comments, do they go back to the plan? Do they consider them, or is it just a nice thing to do?
It will be a lot like the parks plan was. So the parks plan was adopted before it was put into the comprehensive plan. But you all said at the end of it, you said, we will put this in here, but we want, and it was in the findings of fact, I believe, we want to be able to come back and revisit this and address policies next year, which I know Stephen is planning on doing anyway, because it's been fast and there's some things that he would like to see done a little bit differently. So yes, you will have the chance, not this year, but next year, yes, you would have the chance to do that.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? So if there are no problems or suggestions or whatever, I'm going to close the meeting, and I'm actually going to look at the clock this time and say we're going to close the meeting at 7:51. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
job,
Kristin.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Keith.